Hi, I'm personal trainer YUJI.
Do you know the term negative in strength training terminology? Well, some people might know it while others may not. There are those who have heard of it but don't quite understand it. However, there might be a feeling that it's too late to ask about it now. So, let me first explain what a negative is in general terms. The term negative is like the opposite of positive, suggesting a negative aspect. For example, in the case of an arm curl, it's about applying force. There are times when the muscles contract and times when they extend. This contraction and extension is essential. When the muscles contract, they generate force, and when they extend, they also generate force. Of course, if they are not supported, the pants would fall down. When lowering the weight, you are still supporting it. The idea is to feel this load while you are lowering it, which is essentially what negatives are about. So generally, it is said that when you lift, you do it normally, but when you lower, you do it more slowly than usual to emphasize the negatives. However, just using this term alone might not convey the concept effectively to those listening. What do you mean by asking such things? Well, it's like that. It's a bit unclear, and it feels like I understand but also don't understand at all. Even when I try it, I often find it hard to grasp. However, there are probably many people explaining this who also don't know how to convey it properly. So, I would like to explain this part in more detail, and beyond that, I will explain the concept of negatives today. This sense and method of negatives is quite advanced, suitable for experienced individuals. I see. Well, many athletes in bodybuilding and physical competitions are quite conscious of this. I've also heard that at Nihon University of Physical Education, they focus heavily on negative training. What it means to focus on negatives is that in pairs, they always train with two people. So for exercises like the bench press, they lift weights that are just heavy enough that they can only manage about 3 to 5 repetitions. However, they can still do about 5 more with assistance. When someone is working out, they might slightly assist each other, helping with the lowering part while lifting the weight themselves. They give their all when lowering the weight, but they can definitely lift it on their own. This method, known as negatives, involves supporting the weight while performing the exercise. I've heard that by incorporating negatives with assistance, one can effectively build muscle across various exercises. Personally, I use negatives quite a bit and focus primarily on them. However, in general training, people tend to focus only on the lifting part. Instead, if you increase your awareness of the lowering phase and perform it with negatives, you can see quicker results. The reason for this rapid change is that, in strength training, when you engage in exercises that are not commonly performed or use heavier weights, you experience muscle soreness. This muscle soreness can be likened to stretching a rubber band. There is a rubber band, right? You attach weights to it. So, let's put a 5-kilogram weight here and pull it tightly. It can handle it fairly well. Now, if we change this to 6 kilograms, it becomes a bit heavy, which is concerning. When it gets too heavy, small cracks start to form. This is a minor injury, and when you remove the weight and rest, your body repairs itself with new nutrients. To be able to handle that 6 kilograms again, you need to build up your muscles, making them thicker. This process leads to what we call kinhido in bodybuilding. The muscles are being stretched more than they are contracted. While causing muscle soreness is not the goal, utilizing this feeling of being pulled and torn can significantly enhance the muscle repair process. Therefore, it is better to perform the negatives, specifically during the lowering phase, more intensely. As mentioned earlier, it is generally understood that lowering weights slowly is considered a negative. However, I believe that this concept cannot be fully captured with such simple terminology. Now, I would like to explain this in a bit more detail. As you progress to higher levels of training, you can achieve a significantly advanced level of training with negatives. So, I will explain what kind of negatives you should do. For example, when performing side raises, there is a difference between the lifting phase and the lowering phase. When lifting, it is generally easier to lower the weight than to lift it. For instance, with this 5-kilogram weight, it is easier to lower it than to lift it, especially if you are struggling to lift it at all. Even when holding 10 kilograms, you can lower it slowly. Therefore, lowering the weight is generally easier for exerting strength compared to lifting it, allowing you to support heavier objects. Given this characteristic, when performing side raises, it becomes clear that lifting is more challenging, while lowering is easier. So, when actually doing side raises, I honestly find myself using a bit of momentum when lifting. Although I'm currently sitting, when standing, my body might slightly shift, and some people tend to overdo it. While trying to control it, a little momentum comes into play, and the trapezius muscles might engage a bit. By controlling this, I can generate some force and lift the weight. Then, I slowly lower it back down. However, I would like to elevate this to a higher level. What I mean is that up to the top position, it's acceptable to have a slight reduction in weight or a bit of momentum, but once you reach the top, it's crucial to ensure that you are achieving a perfect contraction. A perfect contraction is not just about this level, it's about allowing your joints to move as much as they can. It's not just about shrugging your shoulders. When you touch your joints and lift, you reach the point of maximum contraction, where the muscles here are fully engaged. Whether you reach that point or not determines how much you are utilizing the contraction at that moment. You are using that strength. First, you need to achieve that state where you can exert that strength. Then, you confirm that state for just a moment. A brief instant is enough, maybe just a 1 count, while maintaining that strong contraction. Now, when you apply force tightly, at this moment, regarding the earlier mentioned negatives, you lower the weight slowly. When you lower it, it feels like you are stretching a rope while lowering it, which can create a sense of loosening. However, that's not the case. You need to maintain a strong contraction. Once you have contracted strongly, you should resist while keeping that contracted force as much as possible. This negative aspect involves adding positive force. As you lower the weight, focus on resisting while applying force in this direction. Then, lift it up again, tightening your grip. While adding force during the contraction, create a situation where you are slightly losing against the weight. The presence or absence of this sensation makes a significant difference in how you experience negatives. You have lifted it to this point. Now, slowly lower it, which is the nuance involved. This is about the feeling in your mind and body, but if you don't have the right sensation when lowering, it won't go well. It becomes something that doesn't quite resonate. First, I confirm that I am contracting my muscles. While applying positive force, I feel like I'm resisting during the negatives, really pushing against it. So it's not just about lowering the weight easily. I absolutely want to stop at this point. I want to hold it there, but I can still apply a bit of force in the direction of the weight being heavy. Therefore, while I am contracting, I feel like I am being stretched while adding positive force. I refer to this as doing negatives with positive force, or positive as I sometimes call it. I have that same feeling when I am at Caesarea. Contraction feels like resisting while applying force during the contraction, and you continue to do this. Of course, there are times when the pace will slightly increase from here. It takes more time than when you are lifting slowly, but from the perspective of an observer, it may not be noticeable. They might not understand, but this is my own sensation. It won't happen immediately, but as you practice this feeling of negatives, everything will change significantly. Now, while using negatives like we just discussed, let's talk about the dumbbell press. When performing the dumbbell press, you push in this manner. Since you are lying down while doing the dumbbell press, you can't really take a breath like before. Because you are lying down, your body is supported. However, of course, if you raise your shoulders and perform the dumbbell press in that position, it is not good at all. So you need to firmly press down your shoulders. In that case, to effectively use the positives, you press down firmly on the back of your shoulders. You press down like this. This creates an arch shape. When lifting, basically, I can't do it on my own. If it were just me, I wouldn't be able to manage it well. The people from Nihon University of Physical Education said they would support me, but if I were doing it by myself, I wouldn't be able to do it. I don't have anyone to support me, so I have to do it on my own. At that time, when lifting, it's a given, but I push with both my pectoral muscles and triceps. I push with both, and as I mentioned earlier, I created a strong contraction here. I made a full contraction in my rear shoulders, and it's really tight. While applying positive force, from here we will relax the triceps. We will resist only with the chest. When lifting, engage the chest and triceps, and when lowering, turn off the switch for the triceps, focusing solely on the pectoral muscles. It's about using the chest and triceps, but primarily the chest, with the idea of turning the switch for the triceps on and off. I want to keep doing this. Well, this also requires practice. When lifting, it's okay for the arms to engage. However, when lowering, the arms should not engage. By changing that switch, you can lift 10 kilograms at the limit, but if you disengage the switch, that 10 kilograms can feel like about 12 kilograms. By changing that switch, you can engage positive force while resisting negatively as you lift. You resist while continuously adding incredible strength to contract, even as you succumb to the weight. Creating a sense of resistance, as in the case of the pectoral muscles, is very important. In this case, we switch the approach, but with something like arm curls, it can be considered a bit simpler. Even in arm curls, if the weight is too heavy, it won't lift with just my strength. However, I can intentionally use my hands to assist a bit from here, so even if the weight is something I can only lift about 5 or 6 times, I can still make it work. From there, for the next 4 or 5 repetitions, I intentionally use momentum. I start with a bit of momentum at the beginning, but then I tighten the upper half using my own strength. including the employment aspect, I then perform negatives, contracting tightly from this point. So I deliberately use momentum to push through from here, using a positive force, while resisting with a certain hand position. For exercises where momentum can be utilized, it is important to use it minimally. If you rely too much on momentum, it can lead to a sudden stop and rest, which is not the goal. Instead, you should use momentum only at the beginning, and then rely on your own strength to continue with the contraction and resistance. Well, for exercises where you can use momentum, you should use it. However, in the case of pull-ups, you basically can't use momentum. You really have to pull yourself up, so there's no way to use momentum. It's quite challenging, like an on-off situation, but in the case of pull-ups, I also focus on negatives and practice only negatives myself. For those who still can't do pull-ups, I suggest just focusing on the lowering part. I say to try it out, so if you can kick off from a place where your feet can reach, just kick up. And then focus on lowering yourself. Even if you can't pull yourself up, you can probably manage the lowering part. I think it's possible to resist only during the lowering phase, which is essentially what using negatives means. Therefore, in the case of pull-ups, it doesn't matter at all if you can't pull yourself up. You can still perform pull-ups effectively for your back as long as you can lower yourself. Honestly, I don't mind if you can't pull up at all, as long as you can lower yourself. As for me, I can pull myself up, so what I do is add weights to my waist. There are belts like this that you can wrap around and attach chains to, but I prefer that belt. You know, the belt has large holes for gym plates. I thread it through, and even though it looks like a turtle shell, I attach weights to it. Then, I make it significantly heavier than my body weight. As a result, I can lift it on the first attempt, but right now, I'm using an additional 20 kilograms, and I can only lift it 7 times. After that, from the 8th rep onwards, I have to kick to get it up. It feels like I can't progress any further from that point. Of course, participating in the second set is out of the question, and as time goes on, the number of repetitions I can perform decreases. So, realistically, I can only do the first 3 out of 10 repetitions. The remaining 7 are done in a state where I'm just focusing on negatives. If everyone else is in a similar situation where they can't progress, then I'm also in that same position, doing negatives. This means I'm performing pull-ups using only negatives. Even so, this is enough to build my back. That's the essence of negatives. Even if you only focus on this method, your muscles will develop, so if you emphasize this approach, you can see significant and rapid changes in your muscles. As I mentioned earlier, it's about maintaining that feeling of contraction while resisting, which is a more advanced form of negatives. While performing negatives, depending on the exercise, like dumbbell presses or bench presses, you can adjust the timing of your switches. You might add a bit of momentum or make certain adjustments. There are various techniques, but you can incorporate different techniques based on the specific exercise. That's the idea. By utilizing negatives more and more, your muscles will change much faster. However, it's a bit difficult for the legs. While you can perform squats slowly if you want, exercises like back lunges or squatting cannot be done slowly at all, so I think it's best to do those normally. Bulgarian squats can be done slowly, but with leg exercises, multiple muscles are engaged simultaneously, primarily the quadriceps, glutes, lower back, and sometimes the hamstrings as well. When using the muscles, focusing on negatives in one specific area while slowly lowering the weight to provide stimulation can be challenging for the legs. Therefore, I think it's okay not to overthink it for leg exercises. However, when using machines like leg extensions or leg curls, you can concentrate more effectively, so those are useful. For squatting and standing exercises, you don't need to think about it as much. For the upper body, I think it's important to consider this approach. The same applies to recovery. You can do similar things during recovery as well. It's about how much resistance you can maintain while exerting force. I encourage you to try this negative technique, and it will significantly change your perception, and even with the same weight, it will feel more challenging. However, it leads to quicker progress, so please give it a try.
Please subscribe the channel and follow my Instagram and X. I hope to see you next time. ありがとうございます。